Marissa was drawn to the apartment on Pine Street for its charm and quiet location. It sat above an antique bookstore, with creaky wooden floors and stained glass in the windows everything she thought she needed for a fresh start. The landlord, Mr. Caldwell, barely spoke as he handed her the keys. All he said was that the place had been vacant for a while and that she should ignore any strange noises, because the building was old. It felt like a warning disguised as casual conversation, but she brushed it off on her first night. While unpacking, she found a closet in the back corner that didn't seem to match the rest of the space. It had a musky odor and a pile of old boxers that looked untouched for years. Inside one of the boxers was a faded photograph, a few articles of clothing, and a journal. The name inside the journal read Eleanor Emmy Fielding. It didn't take long for Marissa to realize that Eleanor had lived there before her. She assumed the woman had moved out in a hurry and left a few personal belongings behind. The idea of someone else's life once unfolding in the same space gave Marissa a strange sense of connection until she began reading the journal. The entries started off normal. Eleanor had just moved in, excited about the apartment, trying to make a new life for herself. But as the days went on, her writing began to shift. She talked about hearing things in the night, soft scratching sounds, faint whispers, footsteps where there should be none. She mentioned feeling like she was never truly alone. Marissa started noticing the same things. The journal became less of a personal diary and more of a record of Eleanor's unraveling. The handwriting turned messy, desperate, frantic. Eleanor began to write about shadows that didn't belong to her, doors unlocking by themselves, and dreams that felt more like memories. Marissa realized the journal had stopped abruptly with no explanation. There was no entry that mentioned moving out, no note of goodbye, just silence. The last line in the journal simply read, "She knows I want to leave." That was when Marissa began to wonder if Eleanor ever actually left the apartment at all. When she asked Mr. Caldwell about her, he paused for a long time before muttering something cryptic. He said Eleanor had left physically, but not really. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning he didn't dare explain. The first few nights in the apartment were quiet, except for the occasional creak from the wooden floors or the hum of the old plumbing. Marissa didn't pay much attention at first, figuring it was just the usual settling of an old building. But by the third night, something changed. At precisely 3:13 a.m., she was jolted awake by a sound she couldn't explain. It was soft but unmistakable footsteps, deliberate and slow, moving across the living room floor. She lay still, listening. The steps would move from one side of the room to the other, then stop. After a moment of silence, she heard a light tapping on the glass of the window, slow and methodical, as though someone was drumming their fingernails in a pattern. When she looked outside, there was nothing. No wind, no branches nearby, just the stillness of the night and the reflection of her own face staring back from the window. The next night, it happened again, same time, same pattern. Footsteps, pause, tapping, but this time the tapping came from a different window, one she couldn't see from her bed. It felt like someone was circling the apartment from the outside, testing the boundaries. She even set an alarm for 3:10 to catch whatever was causing the sound, but by the time she looked, everything was still. She considered recording it, but The fear of hearing something in a playback she didn't see held her back. It wasn't just footsteps and tapping. Some nights, she heard what sounded like breathing, deep and heavy, coming from the hallway. She began to dread that specific minute of the night. 3:13 became a moment she feared, a point in time where the ordinary laws of the world seemed to bend, and something unseen made its presence known. Marissa couldn't shake the feeling that the journal wasn't just a leftover item, but a warning, left behind on purpose. The entries she'd read so far were unsettling, but it was one page in particular that froze her blood. The handwriting was different, shaky, rushed, and the ink looked fresher than the others. It simply read, "Don't look outside. That's how she got in." That sentence played over and over in her head every time the tapping returned at 3:13 a.m. She hadn't shown the journal to anyone. It hadn't left the closet, but new pages were appearing. Each night she checked, there was a new message. One page said, "She watches through the glass." Another said, "She likes the silence. Don't speak when she's near." These notes weren't like the early entries. They weren't diary entries anymore. They were direct. She tried to find some logic. Maybe she was sleep writing. Or maybe this was just a trick her mind was playing on her, but none of it felt like her. The voice behind those pages felt completely foreign, darker, colder. She noticed that anytime she read a new message, something would happen that night. After "Don't speak when she's near," she woke up to the sound of her own voice whispering. Though she was alone in bed, mouth closed, heart racing. More disturbing than the journal was the pattern it revealed. The deeper she read, the more she noticed the entries began aligning with her own experiences. The dragging noise Eleanor had once described started happening just above her head. The reflection that blinked half a second too late. Eleanor had written all of it first. It felt like a blueprint, an unfolding map of a haunting experience that was repeating itself word for word, step for step, as if Marissa was being pulled into a life not her own. It started with little things, misplaced keys. A coffee mug moved from the kitchen to the hallway. Lights left on that she swore she'd turned off. Marissa blamed it on stress and lack of sleep. But then she began to notice more unsettling patterns. When she looked in the mirror, her reflection would seem a half second behind, blinking a moment too late, or tilting its head ever so slightly off from her own movement. The more she stared, the more convinced she became that the reflection wasn't copying her, it was watching her. The apartment itself seemed to shift when she wasn't looking. She would walk into a room and find the furniture in different positions. Her dining chairs, once neatly pushed under the table, were arranged in a perfect circle facing inward. Her closet door, which she never opened after finding the journal, would be slightly ajar. Each morning. One morning, she found herself standing in the kitchen holding a spoon, but had no memory of walking there. She'd been in her room just seconds before. This began to happen more frequently. She'd leave her bedroom to grab her phone, only to find herself standing in the shower, fully clothed, confused and trembling. It was as if the apartment had pockets of lost time, moments that slipped away and left her stranded in places she didn't remember walking into. Then came the dreams, or what she thought were dreams. In them, she was always standing in the hallway, looking into the mirror. Her reflection was grinning at her with a mouth that wasn't hers, too wide and filled with something hungry. She would wake up with the taste of blood in her mouth, though her lips were unbroken. Every night, she fought to stay awake, but the apartment seemed to sedate her, pulling her deeper into its web with every hour she remained inside. Marissa knew something was wrong when she started packing her bags and found them empty moments later. She would place her belongings into suitcases, zip them up, and turn around to grab her coat, only to find the bags wide open and bare. At first, she thought she was forgetting to pack, but after the third attempt, she realized the apartment wouldn't let her leave. She tried to call for help, but her phone wouldn't hold a charge past 3%. Every time she plugged it in, the battery would drain instead of rise. When she attempted to use the landline in the bookstore below, the only sound on the other end was static, followed by a faint whisper repeating her name. Time inside the apartment began to warp. Marissa would sit down for a moment and hours would vanish. She'd wake up on the couch with no memory of lying down. Once, she looked at the clock at 2:45 p.m., blinked, and it was 3:30 a.m. The same chilling time. The moment everything changed. The moment something unseen made its presence known. Her own memories began to slip through her fingers. She couldn't remember what day it was, or how long she had actually been living there. She started hearing a voice that sounded like hers, but wasn't. It would mimic her laughter, her footsteps, even the rhythm of her breathing, but it always came from the other room. When she checked, nothing was there yet. Her reflection would still be looking in her direction. Even if the mirror wasn't angled to see her, the apartment didn't want a tenant. It wanted a presence, something to hold inside its walls. Eliano Konwa hadn't moved out. She had become part of it, and now Marissa could feel her own name fading, her thoughts becoming foggy, as if the apartment was writing over her like a page in a reused journal. Asterisk.
Please like and subscribe channel Fear Frequency for more horror stories. Thank you.